Ladies and gentlemen, critter enthusiasts and eco enthusiasts, welcome to another thrilling episode of Eric Likes Animals. I'm your ever excited host, Eric Mahan, and today we're diving into the wild world of environmental news and, of course, the creatures that make this planet their home. Whether you're a first time explorer or a seasoned listener, I am thrilled to have you along for the journey. And speaking of journeys, why don't we get buckled up and get ready for some environmental news? First up, reported by The Guardian, orcas trapped in the drift ice of Japan's Hokkaido coast escapes. A pod of orcas known as killer whales found themselves trapped by drift ice off the coast of Japan's northmost main island. The incident was first reported by a fisherman who alerted officials in the town of Rasu on Tuesday morning. Concerns escalated as environmental groups highlighted the situation. Town officials from Rasu visited the coast and observed around a dozen orcas amidst drift ice about half a mile offshore. Later that evening, the officials noted that the pod had shifted northward. And by Wednesday, when they returned, the orcas had successfully escaped, leaving behind the icy confines. According to an official, it was believed that the orcas managed to free themselves as gaps in the drift ice widened. He expressed relief, of course, stating, "We believe that they were able to escape safely." Footage captured by conservation groups' drone aired on national television and social media, and it sparked both concern within and outside Japan. Some groups even urged the Japanese government to intervene by mobilizing an icebreaker to assist the stranded orcas. While the trapped whales were within Japanese waters, they were close to an island disputed by Japan and Russia. Japan's marking of the annual Northern Territory Day coincided with renewal calls for the return of the Russian-held islands. The long-standing dispute over these islands seized by the former Soviet Union from Japan at the end of World War II, and it remains a hurdle to signing a formal peace treaty between the two countries. Moscow's recent announcement of halting negotiations with Tokyo over Japanese sanctions after Russia's invasion of Ukraine further complicates the situation. The chief cabinet secretary assured reporters that orcas were not considered in any danger, and officials were closely monitoring the situation, which is why they did not intervene. Next up, we got forest pine marten poo count shows numbers growth. And this article, reported by the BBC, goes on and talks about, as far as jobs go, it's not one of the most glorious, but for pine marten researcher Johnny Burks and John Martin, it's a vital task. And their mission? To determine if pine martens can thrive in productive timber forest. Every autumn, they make their way back to the forests of Eye and Castle Ower in Drumfires and Galloway for a rather unique job, counting poo. The increasing numbers of droppings or scats indicates that the population of these protected species is showing promising growth. These forests, managed by Forest and Land Scotland, churn out about 120,000 tons of timber annually, yet they have also host a rising population of pine martens. Now, the focus of their research is on whether installing artificial dens and providing elevated safe spaces for resting and breeding can further boost the pine marten population, with the ultimate goal to demonstrate that a profitable timber industry and pine martens can indeed coexist. Productive forests are crucial for the UK's timber needs, but they're also habitats for various species, explains Mr. Burks. In collaboration with the FLS, they've set up about 50 dens in the Forest of Eye in 2020, while leaving Castle Ower without any aiming to compare the outcomes. Their method involves meticulous counting of the droppings they encounter, with some samples sent for DNA analysis for confirmation. It's a job that demands a keen eye and expert knowledge, but one that could pave the way for a harmonious balance between industry and wildlife. We use pine marten scat as a proxy for population establishment, explained Mr. Martin. This method, though basic, serves as a reliable indicator of population trends, provided one can discern between pine marten and fox scat. Mr. Martin also emphasized the importance of the distinction, highlighting the necessity of DNA confirmation as a fail-safe measure. Encouraging results surfaced from last year's efforts. Both plantations showed an encouraging increase in the abundance, density, and spread of likely marten scats, reported Mr. Martin. Furthermore, DNA analysis affirmed the ongoing establishment of the species in both forests. Notably, the forest of Ah, equipped with those artificial dens, displayed a higher count of scat compared to the Casso Oer. However, Mr. Martin cautioned against hasty conclusions regarding the disparity between the two sites. While the abundance of scats in Ah might suggest the efficiency of artificial dens, the lack of Casto Oer could stem from various factors, including delayed establishment. Bill Cumbus, FLL's regional environmental advisor, underscored the organization's commitment to harmonizing timber production with native species support, recognizing the importance of older trees and cavities for pine martens. FLS is managing forests to retain such habitats. Additionally, including more artificial dens across the country aligns with broader conservation goals, including the control of gray squirrels to bolster red squirrel populations. As pine marten populations thrive, the FLS welcome enthusiasts to explore these forests and encounter these remarkable creatures firsthand. It's a testament to the delicate balance between industry and wildlife conservation, a journey marked by ongoing research and, of course, collaborative stewardship. And then finally, reported by Mangabe, endangered vulture species nesting in Ghana is rare good news about these raptors. And it goes about talking about researchers have recently made a significant discovery in Mole National Park, Ghana's largest protected area, for the first time. Scientists have documented the nesting of three critically endangered vulture species within the park. This groundbreaking observation marks the first time sighting of hooded vultures nesting in Mole National Park, along with initial reports of white-backed vultures and white-headed vultures nesting anywhere in Ghana. These findings had been published in the Journal of Raptor Research. Nico Akarli, president of the International Bird Conservation Partnership and co-author of the paper, emphasized the significance of supporting protected areas like Mole National Park. He stressed that the presence of 3 out of the 4 critically endangered African vulture species underscores the importance of conservation efforts in such vital habitats. The researchers suggest that Mole National Park may represent a crucial refuge for these vulture species in Ghana, particularly for the white-headed vulture, which was not been observed elsewhere in the country. Despite this, Arkela remains hopeful that the additional areas in Ghana might harbor these species awaiting discovery. Over the course of 31 days between 2020 and 2022, researchers extensively surveyed Mole National Park, covering approximately 761 square kilometers, or about 294 square miles, of the park's total area of 4,840 square kilometers, or about 1,869 square miles. And they did this on foot and, of course, in vehicles. Their efforts yielded an estimate of 29 to 36 hooded vultures, 25 to 73 white-backed vultures, and only 3 or 4 white-headed vultures. Notably, the researchers identified 6 hooded vulture nests, 10 white-backed vulture nests, and only 1 white-headed vulture nest. While the Rupel's vulture, Africa's 4th critically endangered vulture species, was not cited during this study, the researchers speculate that it may be an infrequent visitor to the park, particularly during the dry season. They also recorded other threatened raptor species, not limited to at least 3 different species of eagles. Ornithologist Darcy Ogada, African Program Director at the Peregrine Fund, commended the study as a positive step forward assessing vulture populations in the park. She highlighted the historical significance of West Africa for vultures and expressed hope that the publication of this paper would stimulate increased interest in vulture conservation efforts, not only in Ghana, but across the broader West African region. Vultures across the globe are facing unprecedented challenges, with their populations plummeting from one abundant number to critically endangered status. According to Chris Bowden, co-chair of the Vulture Specialist Group at the IUCN, these majestic birds confront a multitude of threats, ranging from deliberate and accidental poisonings to persecution, habitat loss, and the hazards posed by power transmission lines crisscrossing their territories. In West Africa, particularly in Ghana, vulture populations had been devastated by poisoning, persecution, poaching, and often the belief based use purposes. This term encompasses various traditional medical, cultural, and superstitious practices that seek to harness vulture parts for perpetuated benefits, such as good luck. Research indicates the existence of a widespread network involving in the illegal trade and trafficking of vultures across the region, further increasing their decline. Samuel Bolke Yadam, a co-author of the recent paper and a graduate research associate with the International Bird Conservation Partnership, highlighted the detrimental impacts of poaching and egg hunting on vulture populations in Ghana. This trade poses a significant threat to vultures, warranting urgent attention and action, according to Bowden. To safeguard Ghana's critically endangered vultures, the research group advocates for immediate measures to bolster range patrols in protected areas like Mole National Park, and emphasizes the importance of combining educational initiatives with robust enforcement to combat illegal trade. Boak Yadam stresses the need of a nationwide public awareness campaign on the flight of vultures and their ecological significance. Despite the recent findings in Mole National Park, numerous ecological questions persist regarding the status of critically endangered vultures. Challenges such as impassable roads have hidden comprehensive surveys of the park, particularly its northern regions. Many of the co-authors, including one from the University of Environment and Sustainability Development, remains optimistic about the potential of vulture populations to rebound if provided adequate protection. Ongoing research aims to unravel key mysteries surrounding vulture movements, habitat utilization, and their presence in neighboring areas like Bai National Park. The discovery of breeding individuals within Mole National Park underscores the importance of concentrated conservation efforts in ensuring the survival and eventually recovery of these iconic birds. And that is your environmental news. Now, on to the creature feature. For today's episode, I'm going to talk to you guys about a very ancient, very weird creature named the Saiga Antelope. Now, the Saiga antelope is broken into two groups, but we're going to talk about them as one in this episode. So, the Saiga antelope is notably a migratory herbivore traveling great distances to avoid wintry areas that would most likely bury their food. They are found in regions such as Central Asia, spanning regions including Kazakhstan, Mongolia, Russian Federation, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan, thriving in open, dry steppe grasslands and semi-arid deserts. The saiga has been a prominent species since ancient times, tracing its lineage back to at least the last ice age. Now, historically, the saiga antelope roam very vast expanses of Asia and even Europe. Accounts from the 19th century depict immense herds blanketing the steppe landscape. Throughout much of the 20th century, healthy populations of saiga were observed in Kazakhstan, Russia, Uzbekistan, Mongolia, and sporadically in Turkmenistan. The saiga are a relatively small species of antelope. Comparably, it's about the size of a goat. On average, they stand about between 63 to 80 centimeters or 24.8 to 31.5 inches tall at shoulder length. And in terms of their overall length in general, they're about 100 to 140 centimeters or only 39 to 55 inches. They weigh approximately 23 to 40 kilograms or 50.7 to about 88.1 pounds. And they can live anywhere between only 5 to 12 years. As far as what these interesting creatures look like, well, honestly, when you look at them, it literally looks like something right out of the Ice Age. And it is. It definitely looks very weird compared to many of our modern day animals because, well, it's from the past. The saiga's coat exhibits a range of hues, from cinnamon buff to yellowish red, with a lighter tone on their underbelly. Throughout the summer, the coat appears thinner and lighter, whereas in winter, it thickens and becomes denser. During the colder months of winter, the saiga's coat length nearly doubles, and it becomes approximately 70% thicker compared to its summer counterpart, helping keep them nice and warm within the harsh, cold open landscape they are found in. The other thing you might notice if you find a herd is that only males have horns. Their horns are thick, wax colored, slightly translucent, and can grow as long as 40 centimeters or about 15 inches in length. But as impressive as that sounds, in truth, the very first thing you'll notice about all Saiga antelope is their giant honking nose. Now, the Saiga antelope boasts a truly distinctive feature: its oversized and flexible nose, which serves a multitude of functions. This unique adaptation includes an internal structure that actually acts like a highly efficient filter. And during the summer months, it effectively sifts out dirt stirred on by the herd that it's traveling in. So, in all purposes, it acts like a mask to help keep the dust out of the Saiga antelope's lungs. But in the wintertime, it acts like a pre warmer, where it takes the freezing air before it reaches its lungs and warms it up. It does this by running warm blood through that very furry, very silly looking nose. And since its nose is so big, by the time the air reaches its lungs, it's nice and toasty and won't give them a brain freeze. The Saiga's nose is remarkable in both size and structure. It drapes over the mouth and extends downward, almost resembling that of an elephant seal's. Internally, the nasal bones form a complex, convoluted network, while the nasal openings are lined with hairs, glands, and mucus tracts. Each nostril functions as a sac lined with mucous membranes. I know, sounds amazing. But all of this works together to give this nose all those amazing capabilities to help the Saiga antelope survive its very interesting habitat. Now, this giant nostril is also believed to, of course, play a crucial role in smelling, helping sense if predators are possibly nearby, like wolves or foxes. However, it's their keen eyesight that can help spot their other major predator, eagles. And if they spot a predator, well, they run. Being in a herd, it helps because as an individual, you can get easily picked off, making it very, very easy. But when you're in a giant herd with a lot of moving parts, it's much harder for a predator to pinpoint an individual. And that's kind of the helpful trick behind why so many animals travel in large groups. Now, the Saiga antelope also, besides being in big groups, is the fact that they can run, and they can run quite fast, up to about 80 kilometers per hour, which in translation is 50 miles per hour. Now, going back to its eyesight, it's also good to have good eyesight so that they can spot food from very far away in these vast open lands they call home. Some of their favorite things to eat are grass, herbs, lichen, and low-growing shrubs. Basically all things that a couple inches of snow could easily bury. And a large group of Saiga could also eat through fairly quickly, hence why they have to travel so much. They actually have been known to travel up to 50 to 75 miles in a single day. Now, they don't just move to eat, they also move to find a mate, or with the Saiga antelope, many mates, which unfortunately for the Saiga antelope also might be a little too much for them to handle. You will see. So, at the onset of spring, all male herds ranging from 10 to 2,000 individuals pave the way ahead of the female herds. When the females and the males finally do meet, among them, solitary males will assume leadership, overseeing a harem of about 30 to 50 female. Now, this prestigious role is attained through intense confrontations with other horned males during the mating season. The battles are often fierce, brutal, and normally end in either a fatal outcome for the defeated contender, while the victor claims sole dominance. Following this rutting period, which typically spans from December to January, the male dedicates himself to breeding and safeguarding his harem against intruders. Exhausted from this arduous task of defending his territory and mating, many males succumb to these exertions in large numbers. It's a cycle of competition, dominance, and eventually fatigue. Hence why the age range of many Saiga antelope is so wide, from 5 to 12 because so many males don't make it past their successful mating season. Now, after the migration period, Saiga antelope disperse into smaller herds. They swiftly scatter in masses from the slightest hint of danger. Typically, these Saiga herds then compromise down to about 30 to 40 individuals. Now, following a gestation period spanning 139 to 150 days, females will then give birth during late April and May. Approximately two-thirds of females deliver twins, while the remainder produces singles. Young sagas begin nibbling on grass within the first week of life and can outrun a human on its second day. Saga are typically weaned at around 4 months old, and their independence marks an essential stage in their development. Now, females are normally mature at 1 year and males at only 20 months. But don't worry, these male saga are normally very small and will get chased away off fairly quickly, so they really don't get a chance to breed the first year. It will take them a couple of years for them to get big enough and strong enough, but once they do, the chance they make through their first year of actual mating is not so great. But hey, he gets to breed multiple females, so in the grand scheme of things, he probably passes on more genetics than most. Now, with all that in mind, you may of course have fallen in love with the Saiga antelope, and you're probably pretty curious on how they are doing conservation wise. Well, if you know anything about other ice age animals that are still around, the Saiga antelope is doing about the same they are, which is having many difficulties, especially with the warming world, but luckily for them, it's not too much doom and gloom with the Saiga antelope because the IUCN Red List actually just completed a report on them last year and listed them as near threatened, population increasing. However, with these species, these numbers actually can rapidly change. So let's chat about some of the issues that have been happening with them. The breakup of the former USSR led to uncontrolled hunting for their meat. Demand of Saiga horns and relentless poaching to acquire it has been relentless from all kinds of Chinese medicine, which led to drastically skewed sex ratios, with 100 females for every one male. And that resulted in a catastrophic drop in birth rates, and will likely have significant genetic implications as well. Then, of course, there's extreme climate events such as droughts, wildfires, or even heavy snow. Yes, snow can be part of global climate change. It affects the weather. That's the point. One of the last things it can pose a direct threat to Saiga herds is, well, humans and their limiting abilities to forage due to human destruction of key habitats and migration routes from different climate change events, as well as, of course, just humans building things in their way, especially during spring and summer months when newborn Saigas are at their most vulnerable. However, as bad as all that sounds, something actually scarier has happened a lot with these animals, and that is disease. Recent years have witnessed 4 significant mass mortality events in Saiga populations, attributed to various diseases to which Saigas are particularly vulnerable. In 2010, a respiratory disease claimed the lives of 20,000 female Saigas in Russia, shortly after calving, with a similar event occurring the following year in 2011. In 2015, in central Kazakhstan, they experienced a devastating mass mortality event resulting in the death of over 200,000 Saigas within a 3-week period. This event was attributed to a bacteria. The detection of a highly contagious disease known as Peste des Petits Ruminants, commonly known as sheep and goat plague in Mongolia, in the subsequent year led to their rampant epidemic by early 2017, resulting in an 80% decline in Saiga populations. Following this epidemic, the Mongolia Saiga population faced food shortages due to a exceptionally harsh winter the following year, resulting in a further 40% decline in populations over the season. These mass mortality events have posed severe challenges to Saiga populations, hindering their ability to recover and threatening their long-term survival. So yeah, these animals have been just pow, 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 like getting hit while they're still on the ground. It hasn't been very easy for them to recover, even when they do produce twins. And many scientists have, of course, talked about how humans moving into these Saiga antelope areas with their hoof stock is probably one of the big reasons why diseases have started to spread to the Saiga antelope herds, along with, of course, global climate change. Many diseases around the world, even here in North America, because of the warming environment, has created areas for certain bacterias and viruses that couldn't survive in further northern climates to get a foothold in these regions and affect and even devastate animals that are not used to them. Here in North America, moose are having all kinds of troubles due to the warming of environments and diseases being able to get further and further north. So, what can we do? While the future of these rare antelope remains uncertain, there is reason for hope. Saiga females typically give birth to twins, like I said, offering the species a highly potential for recovery, even when population dips low. And let's be real, they've dipped quite low over the last 20 or so years. Now, conservation efforts have also demonstrated success in Kazakhstan, where a 2021 census revealed a remarkable increase in the Saiga population by over 500,000 individuals in just 2 years, totaling 842,000 Saigas. Notably, Kazakhstan hosts over 90% of the global Saiga populations, with Russia, Mongolia, and Uzbekistan accounting for the remainder. Even smaller Saiga herds are showing signs of recovery. For instance, the world's smallest Saiga herd in Yastert Plateau witnessed a remarkable increase from only 4 newborn calves in 2019 to over 530 in 2020. Efforts to combat wildlife crime play a crucial role, of course, in Saiga conservation. The Association for the Conservation of Biodiversity of Kazakhstan collaborates with the Fauna and Flora International and local governments to monitor the Saiga populations, employing methods such as wildlife ranger programs equipped with sniffer dogs to detect Saiga parts and deter poaching. Scientific research, particularly monitoring Saiga population and migration patterns using technologies like satellite transmitters, have helped identify suitable habitats and migration corridors for conservation efforts. Given the challenges of maintaining Saigas in captivity, most conservation research occurs in natural habitats. But with tracking the movements of the Saiga antelope, they know what habitats and what sort of Saiga antelope roadways are best to save to make sure that they can still travel around freely, even with an ever growing human population. Then, of course, restoring lost habitat due to climate change and development, along with ensuring connectivity between habitats through migration corridors, is critical for long term sustainability of Saiga populations. As for disease, besides monitoring and doing research, make sure farm animals do not get to go into prime Saiga antelope habitat, and to make sure farm animals in general, especially ones near the Saiga antelope habitats, are free of disease and getting regular vaccines. And of course, for global climate change, which also is kind of part of the whole disease thing there a little bit too, like normal, try to reduce your carbon footprint at home, because 15 minutes or less of water usage or electrical can help you save these big nosed beauties, the amazing Saiga antelope. And that's the show. I hope you enjoyed hearing about the Saiga antelope. As always, check me out on my Facebook, X, aka Twitter, TikTok, and if you want to email me at ericlikesanimals@gmail.com, links are down in the footer. And of course, once again, thank you for joining on another wild adventure with Eric Likes Animals. This is Eric signing off and reminding you that every creature has a story, and sometimes the best stories have fur, feathers, or scales. See you all next time.